Welcome back to YGOU University. Once again, I am Kevin Knowles, and I am joined by...
Alex Marasco.
Jeremy Stockbluff.
And Bryce Stroik.
This is segment 2, so we already went over Tier List 2019. But I want to get into something that's kind of an interesting topic. It's the positives of a non-rotating sets. So I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the only games where we actually don't rotate sets out. I know Magic rotates sets out, and multiple of the other games have rotating sets. So I just want to hear you guys' opinions on it and kind of why it benefits Yu-Gi-Oh! And then maybe even why it harms Yu-Gi-Oh! In a sense.
A good thing about it is that you can leave Yu-Gi-Oh! And come back, and what was my favorite thing I liked before? I can jump back into that and see how it stands.
I agree with that, but with like the whole like link mechanic, I feel like recently it's more difficult to jump back into the game in that kind of sense because you have to play those kind of cards.
So I was going to kind of touch on that too. It's like when you have a lot of these older cards from older sets, you know, from when you quit the game 10, 15 years ago, a lot of these cards aren't designed to be future-proof. You know, an example, we have cards like Scapegoat, since it was so popular for a while. You know, it has the one drawback of you can't summon the turn you use it. Back then, that was a big deal. But now, you know, you just set it their turn, and suddenly you have a free Link 4 monster. And I guarantee when they made that card, they weren't accounting for those kind of things for the future.
Yeah, I don't think in 2005 they're like,
yeah,
in 14 years, someone's going to use this to summon a giant dragon. Probably you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, and I think one thing of it is that it doesn't allow them to, when they have to make new cards for new archetypes, it creates this like weird rift where like now all these old cards are now ridiculously expensive because they're from a set 10 years ago. And now I have to get all, like if they made a Glad Beast Link monster, it's like, okay, now I have to go get all of my old Glad Beast cards, and they're all from that random set back then, and now they're all ridiculously expensive. Where if they did rotating sets, I think they have to do booster sets of reprinting cards. Like, hey, like if we want to rotate the set out now, and if people want Pot of Duality, we have to reprint it again. And I think there's marketplace issues with that. Like a lot of stores would lose business and like stuff like that. But I think the main positive of it is that if you quit the game and you didn't sell your cards are still valuable. The thing about Magic is like you could quit and then come back 2 years later, and some vendors like, okay, all your cards are a quarter now because nobody uses them. Sorry. And so I think it creates like more sustainability for collections. But I just want to hear some negatives about it. I mean, we said some positive parts about it, but what's kind of a negative side of it?
Power creep is something that just like has to exist if they want to keep selling new things. Either that or they have to just get rid of the cards that you like in some form, which is through the ban list, which is what they do in periodically like 3 or 4 months or so. So like one of the two, but actually both have to exist for them as a business to continue to sell more things in the future. Otherwise, you can just keep playing your old deck and never have to buy anything new. So, I mean, I guess the problem, everyone still plays Burning Abyss like 5 years later. So,
I think a big negative for me is that it kind of stifles the having different formats. We kind of just have, you know, advanced formats. Tournaments are all held in advanced formats, typically. Since we don't have rotating sets, we can't have stuff like Magic has, like Standard and Modern and Legacy, all that stuff, because everything is legal, as long as it's not on the ban list, of course. But everything can be played in this one format, so we don't have different, basically variety. You know, a lot of the joy for a lot of people, I think, playing card games is the deck building itself. And with just one format, you know, you've got your one deck to stick with and not a bunch of different formats to build for.
A lot of the problems is when they make a set, like 90% of the cards in the set are just not going to be played, not even going to look at them. You're just looking for the new secret rares and stuff. But with like a rotating set, those bottom level kind of cards would like see more play because of less options.
Well, like I don't know what set it is, but like I was opening packs and I saw like Demise, King of Armageddon in it, and like they're kind of already like shifting towards that way of like reprinting these old cards into these new booster sets. Be it that they need to change the card text on it or what have you, but I mean they're already showing that they're willing to do that. I think they just need to go full blown into it. And I think it's just like they're kind of like dipping their feet in the water, but they just don't want to commit to it because they're not too sure like how it would affect the format or the community or what?
Yeah, it does give you that ability, or at least for Konami, to release support for old archetypes. Like you said, the Demise, the Ritual deck is got some. Harpy Ladies are getting some. Cyber Dragon's got a lot recently. It gives you the ability to play your old favorite decks with new spice, so that your cards are old, but now you have new stuff to make them more competitive viable if that's something that you're interested in as well.
Yeah, so what do you guys think is better? Like, what would you want to personally see? Do you want us to continue having non-rotating sets, or would you like to see them go, hey, you know what? We're going to have formats where it's rotating now.
I think it's kind of better to keep it the way it is. Like, it is one of the unique qualities of Yu-Gi-Oh! Considering, like, I don't think any other game really does it, which is like a unique aspect, because you can go back. Sometimes, like, some old card becomes expensive, and, like, some people may not like that because it's hard to find, but, like, it is different than, like, a lot of other games, because you can play this old card that you never thought would be used in that way, and it's, like, randomly just a broken card. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
I think after weighing pros and cons, I think I would still rather have the non-rotating sets for a couple reasons. One, I do like when I pick up a deck, I try to stick with it as long as I can, and non-rotating sets kind of gives me that option, especially to show off a little bit of that deck creativity by adapting an old deck to a new format. I had a second point, and I can't think of what it was now.
It's okay. No problem.
I was just going to add on to that. Also, what you said in, like, the first part about playing Burning Abyss, you can adapt and play different cards as long as you want to. I think that is one of the, also another benefit of not rotating, is that there's just a giant card pool, and you can play all of those cards. I mean, a lot of them from a long time ago aren't good and relevant, and that's just part of, like, the power creep and how the game works. But some of them are, like, randomly fringe, but they have uses because of how fringe they are and how they work with the new cards that come out. So I think, like, just the giant card pool adds a lot to, like, the deck building aspect of the game.
I definitely agree. And then I remember my second point now. I think that non-rotating sets, in a way, are a little bit more friendly to budget players, because you don't have to build a new deck every 3 months, every set. You're able to keep your old cards and you keep playing that same deck. You don't have to, my card didn't get reprinted in a different version, or the same name, a different art, something to that effect. You don't have to go out and buy a new version of the same card you already had because it has a different name. It's not legal anymore.
Unless you're a meta whore.
It happens.
Your new deck just
It
keeps
happens.
getting hit. You're like, I want to play the best deck every format, and then you're just like, why does it keep getting hit?
Shout outs to Austin George.
I think we're like, I think the power creep is pretty much like, it's like almost rotating sets, because, like, if we looked at our past topic and our tier list of 5, what's the only deck that had, like, previous support? Burning Abyss. All
Thunder
the other
Dragons.
all the other ones are brand new archetypes. Altergeist is brand new. Sky Strikers are brand new.
Yeah,
the
and that
danger
would-
cards are all brand new. I think it's like you see rotating sets almost, but it's just in the form of how powerful these new archetypes are. And I feel like it's one thing to have rotating sets and having, like, cards stay the same power level, rather than just having the game have a card that has 5 different effects now.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about how sets rotate themselves is kind of true. And really just having it be about rotating sets, it would just kind of jam out all that old stuff, and the format would be the decks that are, like, powerful right now, just with, they wouldn't be able to access previous cards, like Trickstars wouldn't have, like, a big burst turn without Scapegoat.
Yeah.
They couldn't.
So I think one of the best ways they could go about it, in my opinion, is, like I was saying earlier, I like that Demise was inside of that new set. I like that they reprinted him, even though it was, like, random. I think they should do more of that rather than creating all those fluff, trap, and spell cards and all those monsters that nobody plays. I think they could make sets more of like, hey, we're going to reprint some of these archetypes into it, and then we're going to introduce some of these new ones as well. One, it's going to increase accessibility to those cards, and 2, it's going to still be able to introduce new archetypes.
I have to agree and disagree on that end, because I agree, yes, we do want to have more usable cards in the set, because people want to go to tournaments and use the best decks, but at the same time they have to keep in mind the casual players who don't go to tournaments, who don't compete in big events, and they want to say, hey, this card looks pretty cool. All the competitive players say it's garbage, but I like it. I'm going to throw it in my deck. And I think that caters to a broader audience, and that's better as a company trying to support a community, not just aiming at the competitive scene.
That's fair. So do you think like for Konami's focus then for these sets, do you think they should focus on the casual players or the more competitive players? Because in my opinion, I feel like how they print cards is definitely towards the competitive players. One of the biggest examples is when Pot of Duality first came out. Pot of Duality was a rare in Japan, and then they were like, you know what, we're gonna make it a secret rare in America. That doesn't cater towards like the casual player. That caters towards the competitive players, because the competitive players are gonna shell out the money for the 2-3 Pot of Dualities, and now my deck's way more consistent than yours, and et cetera, et cetera. When the casual players are going to be more like, well, I'm not going to get those cards, and then now they're like more not interested in going to tournaments, and then they'll eventually quit the game because they don't have anybody to play the game with.
I see where you're coming from for sure, but I don't think that Konami actually really has anything to do with the secondary market. So, I get that, secret rares are obviously going to be more expensive. They're harder to pull and everything like that. But I don't think that Konami, prints Pot of Duality and they're like, hey, well, I bet this is going to be a $100 card. Let's let everyone else make the money off that instead of us.
Well, I mean, they still make money in a sense, because if it's a hard card to find and people want it, I mean, you still have to buy it from someone, and that person has to get that card from somewhere,
Agreed.
which is from opening packs. And if you want this card, they're going to have to buy packs to open packs, etc.
Well, companies are notorious for doing things. There's a term called artificial scarcity, and the biggest person that does that is Disney. Because if you'll ever notice, if you go to like a Walmart or something, you cannot buy Disney movies that you want. If you're like, oh, I want to go buy Lion King, Walmart doesn't have Lion King out. It's because they release them at small amounts of time and then stop production of them. And we see that with Konami when they make short print cards. We all know short print cards exist. There's commons that aren't that they don't show up in the booster pack as much as they should. And secret rares are like, they tell you on the box, it's one in a box. Like, hey, you're going to get one secret rare in a box, and you're going to have a rare in each pack, and you're going to have a super in each pack guaranteed. So Konami makes those ratios, and they know we're going to print this really strong card that we've already seen is used in almost every single deck. And if we print it at rare, I mean, it has more ability and it has not as much scarcity. But if they print it at secret rare, okay, now I created a scarcity for it, and it's going to have a bigger market for it.
I liked your idea about when they reprint the cards in a set for if they did cycling sets, because it would make it so that like if they had the cycling format, you would play the new cards, and like those bottom level cards that are usually just garbage, those would like become playable. And then that goes back to what we were talking about, is if you open a pack, it's much more enjoyable when you like even the commons in your pack are playable like cards.
True.
Well, like for example, like let's say the Burning Abyss Link monster comes out in the next set. It doesn't, but let's say it does. I would be in favor of them reprinting some of the monsters. Like put Skarm in there, put Graf in there, put Seer in there into that booster pack. So then now when the casual player opens up that new Burning Abyss Link monster, they're like, okay, well, cool, I opened some of the Burning Abyss monsters too. And now they can build a deck off of that one booster pack, rather than going, well, I opened this Burning Abyss Link monster and I have 0 of these Burning Abyss cards. Now I'm just going to go get rid of it. Or now, I have to go to this store or this other player and buy the whole deck core if I want to play this card.
Maybe they'll go something along the lines of like printing them as commons in the next OTS pack. I feel like that's something they usually do. Like if they make some new cards, and then the OTS packs, which is what like every store gets, they'll put like some of the older, harder to find cards as like commons, so you can get them easier for like new competitive players.
Yeah, I think they do. They do end up making value out of, because I mean you obviously have like your core sets, and then you also have things like the mega packs and like the OTS packs that do have the reprints. Like we were talking about, like the Pot of Duality, for example, being an expensive secret when it was released. That thing's been reprinted quite a few times and it is now dirt cheap. So I think the fact that we don't have rotating sets where we'd have to reprint something like Duality but in a different way, we're reprinting it, or they are reprinting it as lower rarity. It's more accessible, it's cheaper, it's easier for the casual player to get that. So I think they've done a pretty good job at making those hard to pull secret rares or hard to pull expensive cards in general much more accessible to casual players.
Okay. Cool. So in essence, everybody at the table is pretty much in agreement that like the non-rotating sets is like our favorite way of playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
I
Yeah.
would say so.
Yeah, I think it's just
Okay.
been handled well.
Okay, cool. I think that's gonna lead us right into the next topic perfectly. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into that.